Welcome to the Legal Learning Podcast. I'm your host, Jolene, and with the Legal Learning Center, I help prospective law students save $300,000 on law school. To receive 3 money-saving strategies today, visit legallearningcenter.com/money. Today, we are joined by Annie Little. Annie is going to share resume advice that is especially helpful if you are trying to get a job where you have no experience, like your first law job or law adjacent job.
Hi, I'm Annie Little. I am a former lawyer turned lawyer career coach. So I practiced real estate law for 7 years, and I founded my coaching company, JD Nation, in 2012. And I've been doing that ever since. So now I focus on helping lawyers find and land their ideal job.
So, how can a lawyer land their ideal job?
Well, with a lot of forethought. That's one big thing. And it sounds really obvious, and especially to probably people who are in law school or who have recently come out of law school, because I remember when I was in law school, that's like all I did, right? I was constantly thinking about what's my next step? Like, what's my next move? What are my long-term career plans? But what happens to most lawyers is once we get into the profession, we get into our job, we lose all perspective on that because our job's really consuming and we're very stressed, and you just don't have the extra space and bandwidth to be thinking about that kind of stuff. And so you kind of lose that muscle of being able to think strategically and long term. And so you're in there well, a lot of people will tell me well, I'm pigeonholed. I've been in this practice area for so long, I can't do anything else. And I'm like, really? You really believe that? So what we really do, I think what's at the root of it is helping people understand that they have transferable skills, no matter which practice area they pick or whatever jobs they've held in the past. Everything you've done, you can translate it into something else. It may not be readily apparent, and that's where I come in to help out.
So, what do you mean by transferable skills?
Yes, great question. So transferable skills just mean skills that you've gotten, developed, honed in your current role or in prior roles that you can then take to a new job and provide value there. So I know rather, when people are moving from one legal job to another, as long as it's in a semi-familiar practice area, they're not as concerned. They're for me, I was in real estate and finance. So I went from a place where I did more finance stuff, but it was all real estate stuff. And then I went to a boutique firm that all they did was real estate. So the focus was more on, acquisitions, dispositions, zoning, that kind of stuff. So I was well, that's pretty transferable. I get it all. I've seen it all. Just my focus will shift a little bit. But when people are well, I want to go from litigation to transactional, they're I can't do that. It's too late. And it's no. You have to break down what you do as a litigator. You don't put on your resume, write briefs. No. What types of issues are you talking about in the briefs? What kind of analysis are you doing? Who are you talking to? Do you do research? Do you do client interviews, witnesses, depositions? What kinds, how do you interact with other people? That's where a lot of it comes in. And then being able to understand how to describe it in a way that the employer is going to understand, because that's what really, really matters, especially if you're going from law to something else. Employers don't want to hear about your legal stuff. And it'll hurt you if you do talk in lawyer terms, because they'll just think, why would you want to be anything but a lawyer? Why do you want to work here? You're just going to leave if you get a better lawyer job. And so that's where a lot of people come to me too. They're I just can't get my foot in the door at a non-legal place. And then I look at their resume and I'm oh, your resume reads like a lawyer. They're not hiring a lawyer.
That's so true, because I know my resume has a lot of my wins, right? Because if I were moving within my industry, they don't care about my skills because my skills should already be there if I've been doing it for so long. But I want to tell them my wins. I went to the California Supreme Court, there's not a lot of attorneys that have. So it's, that's within our industry, a big deal. I've handled $1 million cases. That's not common in my industry. So again, those are big resume boosts for the industry. But if I were to try to become a party planner or something, that's just not going to work.
Right. What you would want to do instead is let's just take your Supreme Court case that you took. it might be something where we look at what did it look like and who were you representing? And instead you'd be like, I did X thing for this client so that they could then, so it shows like what value you provided in a way that the employer can sit in those shoes and be like, oh, well, we could use someone who can do that here. And then like on the back end, you're like, that was a Supreme Court case at California. And they're like, what? That's amazing. And you're like, yeah, but it's not important to what we're doing here, right?
That I love that, because that just, it's so creative, and it's simplistic enough. We can do it's doable. We can do that. Right?
It's so doable. And there's a bit of a process that goes into it. In my course, there's a module called the soft skills scavenger hunt. And maybe I should talk about soft skills too, because that's a thing that clients, when they come to me and I would mention, like, what would you say your soft skills are? They're like, what are soft skills? like, what even are those? I'm like, oh my goodness. Well, that's something that we need to, get into people's sort of lexicon, right? Because and lawyers, we're really focused on our hard skills as well, which are like training, education, like our technical skills. And if we're, like you said, if we're going within our industry, those are the most important things. But I always say that even with that's the case, employers often hire based on people's soft skills, because that's what differentiates you from someone who does the same work as you. And of course, if you're moving into a different practice area or a different industry, those soft skills are what are going to allow you to communicate what you can do for this other employer in a way that they will understand. And to anyone out there watching this, you can or listening, you can just Google soft skills, because it's a huge vast like world of what it is. But generally, it's like communication skills, leadership are common. Empathy is a big one these days that people are looking for. But there's usually like a top 10 for every year, and it's usually some kind of variation, like work ethic. I mean, that's kind of generic. Time management. I wouldn't say multitasking, but there's often in like, especially like legal job descriptions, able to like prioritize multiple deadlines, that kind of thing. So in that case, it's like, oh, so well, what part of that are you really good at? Are you always like known as the person who comes in on time or ahead of schedule? Like, that's a really valuable soft skill. And so by looking through what a job description has, you can see which soft skills are most important to the employer and then pull out yours that may match it. So that's what the soft skills scavenger hunt does, since lawyers, we're not as familiar with those skills. And we really take them for granted because, like you and I have talked about before, lawyers are so resourceful. We have so many skills. We're just like, yeah, of course I can like talk to people. I have to pick up the phone to do my job. It's like, right, but you have to listen to people and you have to translate legal principles into everyday language, and those are really valuable skills.
They are. And I think that you're right. Different lawyers have different levels of those skills. You would think that all lawyers are good listeners because that's what we're supposed to be doing, but some really aren't. So, it can really make a difference. And especially, again, if you are, for example, let's say I want to become a wedding planner, being a good listener would be a really good skill because I need to listen to what the bride wants, right?
Yeah. And managing like multiple projects at a time, because like if you're doing a wedding, for example, like how many mini projects are there within a wedding, right? Because you've got like, you can even think of it as departments, right? Like there's catering, and then there's like music and dancing, and then there's all that stuff. And so you can sort of make an analogy to like your caseload. Be like, oh, there are all these competing priorities with different deadlines. And you could even talk about like money concerns, because that's something that I've noticed with my clients who are looking to go in-house or kind of legal adjacent, like legal ops or something like that. In their interviews, they get asked a lot about like, what kind of experience do you have with like finances? And I think there's this myth or perception that lawyers are just dunces when it comes to math. And that's not the case. Like, I mean, I took a lot of math. I loved that kind of weird stuff, but we know how to, balance an account. We know how to like manage a budget.
Right.
So that's kind of a thing where you would want to be able to come up with some examples of that. But that's like the latest thing I've noticed.
Wow, that's a good one because I know that's kind of the running joke is we don't do math, but I know over the years, I had to do a lot of math when I was calculating settlements and whether maybe we underpaid a few years ago on some benefit and overpaid. And, so we're taking a credit here, but we owe you over here. And so the settlement actually changes numbers, and it's sometimes complicated math. You actually could be surprised at how much you do math in law. So
really, yes, because I did
Yeah.
settlements in real estate. I would actually, if there wasn't real estate involved, if it was just like a business purchase or something, I would have to create that settlement statement like in Excel with the formulas and like the credits and and the taxes and
Yeah.
yes, I know how to deal with money. Person interviewing me for a business job.
I think that's a good point, because I think as soon as you said it, I cringed, but really, I think we are more resourceful and driven. Like, as we can really get things done and figure out a way to get things done than we realize. Now, as far as the soft skills go, is there a special spot on the resume we should be putting it, like a special, like under extracurricular activities, like a soft skills section, or should we be mingling it in?
Oh, that's a great question. I would say do not make like a separate section for soft skills. It's more, I think I like to think of soft skills as the adverbs of the career world. So it's all about how you do your job. So it's like, how do you do your hard skills in a way that's different from other people? So maybe you're a really, I always struggle to come up with these examples on the spot, right? Like I've never had 1,000 at my fingertips, but kind of like if you take depositions, maybe you are extremely calm and patient and disarming, so you would find a way to work that in that kind of framework I was alluding to before, where it's like and maybe you could say, I interview, because you could say instead of taking a deposition, right? Like I interview clients in this situation, and I disarm them so that they feel comfortable sharing personal history with me or something like that. So if you were going to go into a field where you needed to really gain trust with people, you could be like, oh, like what soft skills do I have that help me to develop trust? Like, oh, people really like warm up to me pretty quickly in a deposition. And it's because I'm really, really calm and I listen really well, as opposed to being like really aggressive. But that's another thing. Maybe you're really aggressive in your negotiations. Like maybe you're just like, I am just known for being like the hardest core negotiator, but I won't kill a deal either. So I'm like a really hard-nosed negotiator, so that my clients can get the best possible deal without cratering it.
This is so great, because, I did a little research on this ahead of time, just to make sure I knew what I was talking about. But I still had a lot of trouble applying it to myself. And the examples you're giving are so great, because definitely, I'm your best friend at deposition, right? I pull out all the stuff. And again, I don't know why wedding planning sounds so natural for me, but, if you had to sit down and really figure out why a bride was having a resistance against a Friday night wedding or something, or I don't know, whatever, when it's in perfect spot. And so let's dig into this, or, or like you said, negotiations. I am very known for being friendly. I'm the schmoozer, but, and I'm not a hard nose, but it is what it is. And I don't play around. Here's my number, take it or leave it. And, for me, let's go to trial. I'm done. I don't want to talk. Like, here's my number. This is the reality.
Yeah.
I'm not
You're like
faking.
Friendly and firm, so that we can get to a resolution as quickly as possible.
Yeah. And I can totally see, like, when you talk about how that might translate. And it's so interesting, because really, I just feel like, okay, I have my skills, but I just seriously don't see how they translate. So obviously, yes, if anyone wants to make a big transition, they do need you, because I tried to Google this and it just was so overwhelming. I mean, the soft skills, there's like 500 of them. So
right. And it's like, which ones do I mean, because we all have them to some extent, right? But it's looking back in the soft skills scavenger hunt, I have all these exercises that help you to go back and look at all kinds of things you've done, not necessarily in your career too. Like I always like use the example of like, maybe you were a lifeguard in high school. Let's go back and then answer these prompts about, what did you really enjoy about, like, I love this question. What did you look forward to in that job? Because, even when you have a job that's awful, I still remember like sometimes being like, ooh, I actually like doing this today, and be like, ooh, I actually really like drafting loan documents or whatever. Sounds so nerdy. it's like, ooh, but it was like, and then the next stage is like, why did you like that? You go, because maybe there's a soft skill in there that helped you, that made it easy for you so that you found it enjoyable in some way. So it does take some work. And sometimes lawyers get a little sort of like overwhelmed because it's almost too much. And and I'm like, yes. And it's tough because right now you're kind of in a vacuum. But what's really, really helpful is if you have an idea of what you want to do, which not everyone does, that's a whole separate thing. But once you have an idea, you pull up a job description and you can go through and see. And this is something that a lot of us lawyers, myself included, like didn't do most of the time, is when you see someone, it's like, we need someone who's a great communicator. You're like, blah, 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 great. Like, it's just fluff. Like, that's what my clients say. Like, well, it's just fluff. They want someone who's a good communicator, someone who can meet deadlines, and someone who can manage projects. Like, duh. And I'm like, right, you're not going to, and they're like, I'm not going to put down like great communicator. I'm like, of course you're not. But tell me some stories about when you were a great communicator. What made you a great communicator? What kind of benefit did your employer or did your client get because of your communication skills? And then they can kind of drill down from there. Because if you say, like one of my soft skills, it's also one of my top character strength is like humor and playfulness. You can imagine how useless that was as a lawyer. It was so valued. There was a good way for me to get clients and build relationships. But as far as like my bosses and stuff, they were just like, hey, smartass. I mean, that's why I never even tried to go into big laws. Like, I can't. Like, I just can't fake it. It's just too stuffy. But I wouldn't want to just be like, oh, like one of my best soft skills is the ability to bring levity to a situation. Because if an employer isn't looking for that, you don't need to really focus. I'm not saying you need to hide it, but you don't want to like put it to the forefront. It's much more effective if you can sort of learn how to seek out what soft skills they're looking for. And then those will also help to kind of bridge any gaps you might have in your technical experience. Because you can say like, well, I'm a really good communicator. I haven't really done this exact thing, but I've gotten these really great results with my communication skills in these other scenarios.
Yeah. You've got me totally dying to go look at my resume right now, just, to have two different ones or whatever, but oh my gosh, I wonder what I have on there.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think we do shoot ourselves in the foot a lot with, again, trying to put our wins on there, trying to put how impressive we are instead of how helpful we are or creative we are, or whatever the thing is that these places might be looking for, whether, it's a startup that we're just trying to transition into, or something totally like a floral business, whatever it is, you know? Yeah.
Well, and a great question to ask yourself when you're going through your resume, and this comes up a lot with, lawyers and their like awards, accolades. And I say, okay, what I need you to ask for each one, I need you to put yourself in the shoes of the place where you're applying and picture them saying, so what? And if you don't have a good answer for them as to why that particular thing is relevant to the work you're going to do for them, take it off. Like your real estate on your resume is precious. Don't take up that space with something that someone's going to be like, so what? Like, oh, I argued at the California Supreme Court, and the florist or whatever is going to be like, and?
Right.
Thanks for telling me, I guess. You're going to be like, was it a
nice
floral issue?
He might be like, I didn't know we even had a state Supreme Court.
Right. It's like, no, come back. I can help you. Let's stop talking about that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I could totally see that. Okay. Now, what about students who just want their JD? They don't really want to go into law, but they don't necessarily know what they want to do. They just, they really are interested in, like you said, law adjacent, just the whole career path in general. How can they make themselves not just marketable in the resume, but get past that whole, are you just waiting for your bar results kind of question?
Yeah. And there's so much to unpack there, right? But just to give the short answer, because this happens because I work with more experienced attorneys, maybe they tend to have 2 to 3 years of experience, some a little less. But they and some of them start in JD adjacent, or they've done some other things, and they fear like that they're just going to focus on my past experience and I don't want them to. What do I do? And I'll say, well, you don't have to do this, but this is, the challenge I like to pose to them is I say, why don't you take the first sentence of your cover letter and address that concern? Because if there's something that you're worried about that you can anticipate, that's going to be the big hang up issue for anyone who sees my resume or my cover letter. Like, nip it in the bud. It's just like in litigation, right? Where you like put your own client on the stand and bring out their dirty laundry.
Yeah.
Like, you do it first, you get to control the narrative, and the jury, the judge, you're like, see, nothing to see here. No big
nothing
deal.
to hide.
Like, we totally know it's a thing. You're like, I'm not pretending to waltz in here like I know how to be a day trader or whatever. Like, I know that, so with people like that, or people who, want to convey like, hey, I know I went to law school, I've got a law degree, here's why I don't want to be a lawyer, right? You have to make it really clear, like, I'm applying for this job for this reason. I know it seems weird because of my background, but this is why I'm doing it. And then they can at least be like, well, I'm not sure I believe them yet, but they'll keep reading instead of being like, why did this person apply? So, and the people that try it, it works. I mean, I understand it's scary. And my little trick there is to, like, they always say the first sentence, whoever they are, the first sentence you should say is, I found this job posting and I'm interested. I just put it in a subject line. I just put subject line, job number, whatever. And then that first line is going to really stand out in the first place. And in the second place, we're like, oh, they actually, how are they in my head? They know I'm like looking at them. Why are they applying? And I'm telling them, same thing for like people, if you're going to be moving to a new location. It's like, yes, my address is Minnesota, but I'm moving to Philadelphia. Boom.
That's smart. That makes sense. Okay. Just get rid of it. Okay. So I have a question. I know you said you work usually with people who have some experience, but when I was kind of thinking about this, I was so worried. I worry about everybody, but I was so worried about those 1Ls who either drop out or get kicked out. And, they have so many skills. I feel like the majority of your skills in law school, you really do learn in that first year. I mean, you really learn how to analyze, how to tear things apart. You learn, I think, just about everything you need to know about a contract. And you learn the basics of legal writing. So you've got most of your law school skills. It's just maybe not hammered into as much. But how do you think they could make a transition out of law? How can they explain themselves? And again, using those skills they just developed to bolster their resume.
Yeah. I mean, just right off the bat, address why didn't you finish law school? Or like, you have a thing of, 1 semester, 2 semesters of law school, you just say like, yeah, I went, I really liked this, and this about it, but ultimately I'm more interested in doing what you're hiring for. That's your first line of your cover letter, or of an interview or whatever. And then, so you have it like on your resume, but like, it's not going to be at the top, but just, put that you have it there. Unless it's one where they would value that kind of experience. Like if you're going to be like a contract specialist, some of those jobs like with the federal government, that are kind of administrative, they might value that a little bit. But what you would want to do again is to take a look at those soft skills that they're looking for in the job description and dig down and think about ways that you used that in law school. And it will be like, I hear you on the 1L thing, because it's a little tougher because as a 1L, you don't do a lot of like clinic type stuff or a lot of volunteers. You're just kind of trying to stay afloat in that first year. But now that you have those analytical skills, you might also be better equipped to leverage any past experience from other jobs in explaining how those relate as well. But I mean, that's a tough situation. That being said, my friends that left law school after a semester or the first year, I was so jealous of them. Like, I wished I had the courage to do that, because I hated it. But I had, I had this reason for going to law school, which wasn't great, but I needed freedom from my family and I wanted financial independence. It was the easiest way to get there. And I was just like, oh, good for them, And then the whole ego thing too, like, oh, like, everyone's going to think I quit. Like, why'd you quit? That kind of thing. But so for anyone out there who's considering it, I'm so proud of you. Like, listen to that. You're saving yourself like possibly hundreds of thousands of dollars by doing that, making that decision. And, that I think I was also falling prey to like the sunk cost fallacy as well. It's like, well, I'm already like 30 grand in, what's another 60 or whatever.
Right. That's what we all say. It's really, it's that twofold thing of how am I ever going to pay that back? I might as well just finish. And then also the other half of what is everyone going to think, whether it's your family and friends or classmates, that I don't know why you care.
Right. Because you're probably not going to be around them anymore.
Yeah. I'm like, really, but I know at my school, since they kicked out a third of the first year class,
no,
you could say, oh, I chose not to come back, but who's going to believe you? So, there were people when we came back in the fall, everybody was looking around, right? And saying, oh, who's not here? Who's, and so we were collecting the stories. And I remember there was one girl who had been in a car accident over the summer. And so she was going to take the year off. And I don't know if she did or not. That runs through your brain. Was she in a car accident? Like, I don't know. Maybe she just, got kicked out and just made up that story. Or maybe she did pass, but barely, and decided to cut her losses. Right. So it's almost kicked out, basically, right? I mean, it's the same thing, really. And so it's horrible because, it's like, who cares? Just stop. But
well, we can't control what other people think. And it sounds very like easy to say and almost trite these days because we all say, well, you can't control it. But then what do? Well, you focus on the things that you can control, like thinking about how you're going to feel if you do another semester, or how are you going to feel if you quit? Yeah. And think about that. And it's tough because the only way to really know is to do it.
Right.
Same with practicing law. You don't know until you try it.
I think with stuff like this, though, where you've really honed in on these transferable skills or just how to define yourself and how to explain yourself, I think that was one of the biggest fears was if I drop out and I'm $50,000 in debt, I need a good paying job. I can't afford to just, become like, a hairdresser. I need to actually have a good job. And so I need to have that great resume. I need to explain myself. And this is where I think, when I was kind of thinking about transferable skills and lawyers, I thought, oh my gosh, what about the poor 1Ls?
Well, and a big part of it is that sort of lack of confidence that you're speaking to, where it's like, how do I talk about myself if I didn't graduate or if I haven't had a legal job yet and I want to have a legal job, and I've been a lawyer and that kind of stuff. And that's something that a lot of my clients will talk about. They'll go through the process, they'll find the job they want, and then they land an interview and they're terrified. They're like, what do I tell them? Like, I've been out of work for 2 years. What do I tell them? I'm like, honestly, it doesn't matter the words that you say. All that matters is that you say it confidently, that like you feel comfortable explaining it. You don't have to say any more than you want to. But if you can say it in a way that feels good to you, that feels truthful to you, that's going to come across, right? It's like, because really what they're looking for is to see, are you hiding something, right? And that's the fear. They're like, well, they might think I'm hiding something. I'm like, right, but you can't control what they're going to think. All you can do is control how you're going to feel when you tell them, and so we kind of like worked out some various scenarios, like, how would you feel talking about this? How would you feel saying it this way? Because there are always those concerns, like you don't want to bad mouth your prior employer, even though they were jerks, right? And everyone reads between that, like they get it, like, it happens, but they just, that's a really big thing though. Like they want to see how honest you are, and that says a lot about your integrity. And I mean, that person in particular, she totally landed the job. She was like, I just felt so good going into it. I'm like, right, because it's not what you're saying, but when you are apprehensive about being asked that question, even if they never ask the question, you're going to be like, I'm like tight. Like you're going to be like nervous that it's coming up the whole time. And you're going to come across as nervous and like you're withholding something, even though you're just nervous.
Yeah, it's horrible. And I'm one of those horrible interviewers. If you have experience, if you're new, I'm nice. But if you have experience, I like to just see how people answer questions. I don't care what the answer is. I just want to see how they answer. And so I remember one guy, he lived like an hour south of our firm, and we had a courthouse 2 hours north of our firm that we never went to. I mean, it was technically in our jurisdiction, but like we never went there. And we had a few people who lived an hour north of our firm, so we would always send them. But it was like never. And so I just asked him, well, we cover that courthouse, right? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, so how are you gonna feel about that if you have to go there? And he was just like, well, I work really long hours, and, I hope I wouldn't have to go there a lot, but I figure it would be a bit of a trade-off because I understand that you guys work less hours here. So I'm hoping overall there's still a benefit in my favor there. And I was like, that is a brilliant answer. I love you. Like, you got the job, like I just want to hear, I don't care how fumbly it is or how bad it is. It's just, I want to hear something real,
Right. As opposed to be like, oh, no problem. I don't mind that at all. Where you're like, really?
Yeah.
2 hours each way? That doesn't.
Yeah, no, it's like, so yeah.
Just be real with me.
Yeah. But no, this is so exciting because, honestly, even people who have to take time off, like you were saying, I had a friend who had twins right after we graduated. She never got to practice law. And then when she tried to re-enter, she was so nervous and she just failed at every interview. And then she finally actually worked with someone like you, where they drew out her skills and they found out that because her kids were they were special needs, they were in all this therapy and all this stuff. And that's partly why she couldn't go back to work. And so in order to have some me time, she would get up at 5 a.m. every day to exercise.
Oh my gosh.
And it's like, girl, you are motivated. You are organized. You're on top of it. Like
disciplined.
Yes. And so then she got a job. And it was just a matter of how she looked at herself, how she looked at her situation. And it was, but it took someone like you to really help her find her things, what she was doing. Because I think these soft skills are just part of us and we don't see them and we don't realize them because we're just like, well, of course I have to do that. No, you don't.
Right. Well, and we don't always understand how much value our soft skills bring, yes. when you and that can be something you do after the soft skills scavenger hunt. I'm like, if you're having trouble finding patterns, have somebody else look at it for you, or I'll look at it for you and I'll pull out some patterns and explain to you why they're valuable, why those skills are valuable, because what it means to somebody for you to be able to do that. And they're like, oh, I hadn't thought about it. Or, oh, not everyone can do that. No, not everyone's that good at that. And it's part of it is like this, we're in this echo chamber as soon as we get into law school, right? And we're told like what success is supposed to look like. I call it like the law school measuring stick. And we take it with us, even though we don't like it, we'll still take it with us and we compare ourselves to it. And I mean, I was one that was like, well, I'm never going to work in big law, so like F that. But at the same time, my husband is in big law. And so when I would go to his parties and stuff, and people would ask me what I did, I would always be like, am I detecting some condescension? I'm like, get over yourself, Annie. Like, do you care or don't you care? Like, clearly I care. Clearly this measuring stick is following me around. And part of that is this myth, I don't know, that they tell us like, you can't have any breaks in your career, any gaps in your resume. It's the kiss of death. And it's just not true. And sometimes I have people come to me and they're like, I don't think it should be a deal breaker, but am I crazy? Like, am I just delusional? And I'm like, oh, no, you're fine. You're fine. And I mean, that's a big thing. Like, how do I explain my time off, or my time away? Right. I'm like, you just do. Like, truthfully and candidly. And once you give an answer, everyone's going to move on.
Yeah.
Especially like with health issues and like children.
Yeah. I think it's so important. I think, and especially with COVID, I think that people have become so much more understanding that life happens, that we actually do have a life, that I'm not alone in this bubble here. I have children, I have dogs, they bark, things like that, I mean, yeah, because I wasn't disciplined, but there was a year where I had a lot of big cases, and in corporate, the whole team gets on board all the way up the chain. And we had so many conference calls that I started doing them even sometimes on my day off or in my commute. And that year during my annual review, and not that I was marked down, but it was kind of like, hey, we got a few complaints that there was one time, a dog barking. And once or twice there was like kids, like maybe you were in the car, and I'm like, okay, so they were on the East Coast, and I was trying to like do the 7 a.m. that they all want to do, which means I
Right.
had to take my kids to preschool. I'm sorry. They're pretty quiet. And yeah, one time I was on PTO, but I, did it anyways because everyone else could do it. And, I wasn't doing anything. I was just doing errands that day. So my dog was there. I'm sorry.
You're like, oh, I'm sorry. I was trying to go above and beyond and it wasn't good enough for you.
right. Well, after that point, I just stopped, and I actually never got complaints that I wasn't available for 2 weeks on an important case. But fine if that's how you want it. I mean,
Right, fine. I will just tell you I'm not available at those times if you don't want me
Yeah.
there in those situations. But I mean, it's kind of the Sophie's choice, and like
Right.
we're supposed to figure it out.
Exactly. So yeah, law has so much to it to figure out, and then when you want to maybe move or transition or come back after you've taken some time off, there's just so much more to it. It just seems so much harder. Even with our own jobs, we can't figure it out. So it's just, how are we supposed to figure it out when we step outside our box?
Yeah. Yeah. But it is possible. And once people start to do that, introspective work, and reflective work and looking back at what they've done and then looking forward at what they want, it kind of starts to make sense. And that's where the confidence starts to come in again, because I feel like I'm saying that a lot on this, but like confidence is really important. And I think one of the things that surprised me the most when I started coaching lawyers way back when was that their confidence was so low, and like what you've been saying, like lawyers, they're so resourceful and they're so smart and they have so many skills. And that's where I come from too. And I'm like, wow, there's really a lot happening here where confidence or the lack thereof is what's causing a lot of problems for people in their careers. And so doing it, and it's not, you can't fake it till you make it. You can't just say like, oh, say these mantras and be confident. You really have to figure out like, so where is your lack of confidence coming from?
Yeah.
And a lot of it is, I don't think I have any transferable skills, honestly. I'm like, wow, we can help with that.
Well, we are just about out of time. Annie, do you have any overall tips that you want to make sure the law students know, maybe going into law school, so that they are better prepared when they come out?
Yes, I love that so much. So what I heard going into law school, what so many people heard as we were considering going to law school, once we got there, as we were in it, was you can do anything with your law degree. I agree. You can. However, you need to be a lawyer first if you want to go that route. If you want to take your JD and use it as a tool to catapult you into other things that you may not otherwise get into as quickly or easily or at all, you don't get that advantage just by graduating with your JD. That in and of itself is not enough. So just having that understanding, like if you want to go and have like your JD and an MBA or something, you have to have the experience to go along with it. And not a ton. I'm talking like 1-2 years, that can be enough. But people know. People do know that you don't know how to be a lawyer and you don't have a whole, like the type of legal skills that they want from someone with a law degree if you've just graduated. Of course, there are a few exceptions, but that's the expectation that I always like to clarify, because yes, I do believe you can do anything with a law degree after you've practiced a little bit.
Awesome. No, that's really, really good advice, because everyone thinks they can go to law school just for the JD. And I mean, okay, yeah, technically you can, but there's a whole issue with that. So yeah. Okay. So now I know you're all over. You're on YouTube. What's your YouTube channel?
Oh, you know what? I don't like, what is it? I don't have like a personalized one yet. It's just Annie Little. Look me up on there.
Where else can they find you?
You can find, I love to play on LinkedIn. Like my thing is like the /Little Annie, and the JDNation.com is where I live on the interwebs. And then I'm kind of on Instagram a little bit at the JD Nation.
Okay, perfect. I'll make sure to link it all up. And what was the name of your program, so they're aware of that as well?
Oh, my program. It's called Make Your Next Move. And it's a combo of courses, or a course, and group coaching and Q&A and community support. It's
okay.
my favorite thing I've ever done.
That sounds awesome. And it's all just to help lawyers transition, whether it's in law or out of law. Is that right?
Yep, it's a practical process for finding and landing your ideal job, even if you don't know what that is yet.
Awesome. I love the sound of that. It just sounds so, I guess, hopeful, because when lawyers get burnt out, we don't know what to do. We're so burnt out.
And
and a lot of people just want to leave law or just change within their field. And I think that having group coaching can be so helpful and insightful to see all the options and not just make a hasty wrong move.
Yes, that is key, because we've all been there. I think everyone I talk to, it's like, made a couple hasty moves. Now I'm ready to not. Sometimes you have to get out, but
yes,
when you're ready.
And sometimes you need to make the hasty moves to realize that you actually need to slow down and make a plan. So yeah,
exactly.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Annie. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Jolene.
Before we get into my top takeaways, a quick word from our sponsor, Juno. If you have to take out student loans, check in with Juno first. Juno can often offer law students 1% to 2% lower interest rates than the federal government, and with no origination fees and oftentimes cash back as well. Visit advisor.legallearningcenter.com/Juno for more information. My top takeaways from this chat with Annie. Whether you didn't complete law school, you took time off, it doesn't really matter. It's all about how you present yourself. Number 2, keep track of your soft skills as you progress through your career. It's not just about your wins. That's it for this episode. All the tips, links, and so forth will be in the show notes. A full transcript will be available at legallearningcenter.com/Annie Little. And if you learned something today, please leave a review. That just makes the show more visible to others and can help more people who may need it. Thanks.